the central banks are continuing to add to their positions. China, 7 months in a row, has been buying. India continuing to buy. Their gold reserves have risen by over 40% since they started accumulating gold a few years ago again. The Bank of Iraq, their reserves in one day, 2.5 tons of gold, increased their reserves by 2%. Singapore, their gold reserves up 35% in 3 months. They've been the largest purchaser of gold, the largest accumulation of gold by the central banks ever over the last 18 months. When you see countries continuing to move away from the West, including our allies, and using gold and silver as a way to de-dollarize, then the price means nothing.
Andy Schectman, the president and chief executive officer of Miles Franklin Precious Metals Investments, says it's not time to be worried about recent declines in precious metals prices, especially silver, which seems to be getting frequently clobbered. During a recent interview with the Liberty and Finance channel, Schectman details some very bullish and positive news for both gold and silver, which, despite price declines, are still being accumulated by central banks in record numbers. According to the Miles Franklin president, news of the rapidly strengthening BRICS alliance and their very obvious preference for both silver and gold is enough reason to be assured about your previous metals investments and even consider stacking more. During the interview, Schectman assesses how the BRICS alliance, with a gold-backed currency that challenges the greenback, will change the current geopolitical dynamics and significantly shift power from the West. According to the latest report, the BRICS alliance has formally received applications from 25 countries looking to join the bloc. This is up from less than 10 countries that had formally applied a few months back. Those countries are Afghanistan, Algeria, Argentina, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Belarus, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Sudan, Syria, the United Arab Emirates, Thailand, Tunisia, Turkey, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe. Some of these countries are large oil producers and major exporters of oil and gas to the United States and Europe. Combined with the might and affluence of existing BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, this is certainly a pivotal moment for global politics and alliances. And right in the middle of these changing dynamics lie gold and silver, two precious metals that could begin to enjoy the status the US dollar has enjoyed for decades. In addition, the dethroning of the US dollar, which is currently the BRICS' main motive, could have disastrous effects on the US economy and markets. This is why Andy Schectman urges investors to be more proactive in preparing for the very uncertain and gloomy future by steadily investing in precious metals and ignoring the noise of price manipulations and declines. We will now bring you clips from the interview. Please watch to the end, share, and like this video. Also, ensure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thanks, and enjoy.
As far as what's going on in the metals market, look, I haven't read why the price of silver got clobbered today. And whatever it is, it doesn't make sense, because if we look at what happened last week when it got clobbered, 25,890,000 ounces, or 5,178 COMEX contracts were dumped in 15 minutes. So no one in their right mind who is trying to maximize a return on any asset being sold would dump that kind of quantity at the open. It's done for effect. It's a drive-by shooting. It's done to demoralize. But in reality, you take a step back and say, what kind of idiot would ever do that? And the answer is no one who was trying to maximize a return. It is someone who is trying to do this for effect. And that's why when you see all of these things happen, when you see the largest accumulation of gold by the central banks ever over the last 18 months, when you see countries continuing to move away from the West, including our allies, and using gold and silver as a way to de-dollarize, then the price means nothing. And I know it's hard to hear that. It's almost hard to say it, but it's true, because the price action is being betrayed by the massive drawdowns that we continue to see on COMEX and on the LBMA. And I think it's worth noting. It really is worth noting that if we talk about just the amount of deliveries that we've seen this year, we've seen almost 13,000 silver contracts stand for delivery. That's this year. That's 65 million ounces that have stood for delivery. That's over 2,000 tons. And when you talk about gold, over 240 tons have been delivered out of COMEX since January 1st. And last week when I was laying around doing a little reading on the Mend, I read that 55 tons were delivered last week in the 7 trading days up to when I was reading this on Tuesday or Wednesday. So you can see that deliveries is a rising tendency. We are seeing more and more and more deliveries quietly, though. Massive deliveries off the LBMA. The price and the price action is meaningless when you see big deliveries across the globe and a continuing drive to de-dollarize into this August meeting, which now our allies are requesting access to, where supposedly they're going to issue a new currency pegged to commodities. This is the volatility before the storm. And, normally they say the calm before the storm. But if you look at a big move generally in history, a big move in a market, it's usually precipitated by a great volatility leading up to it. And this volatility, which makes no sense in the greater scheme of things, this price action, it makes no sense in the greater scheme of things. To me, it makes sense to what the playbook that they've used for a very long time. And when you see the type of maneuvers that they're making by dumping 25 million ounces at the opening, I think it reeks of desperation. And to me, we're getting close to that moment. So one last thing I'd like to say, in the 3 years that I've been doing this with you, I don't know that there's been a better environment right now because of really there's been a little bit of apathy in the market right now. And it's slow in the entire precious metals space. It's slow. And I think price, premium, availability, it's as good as it's been since 2020. And so people who are looking to do what the biggest money in the world is doing, I don't know that there's been a better time to do it in the last 3 years.
In addition to his silver update, Schectman also discusses special details to consider about the BRICS deal. Not only the number of countries that are almost tripping over themselves to escape the dominance of the United States, but also the combined strength of these countries. In addition, France, which is one of the United States' oldest friends and allies, is doing very large deals with Russia and China and asking to be a part of the BRICS next meeting in August. Earlier this week, Catherine Colonna, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, said French President Emmanuel Macron wishes to be the first Western leader to be invited to a BRICS summit. Having a dialogue is always positive, even when we don't 100% agree on everything, Colonna said on Monday. We are thinking out loud about the possibility of continuing this dialogue. Why not at the BRICS summit? But it's obviously a decision that only the relevant countries can take, she added. Let's get back to Schectman's interview as he discusses the move from a US-dominated world to a multipolar world, which could very well be facilitated by gold and silver.
We talk about the BRICS. There are 25 countries now that have formally applied to BRICS. We're told that on August 22nd in their South African meeting, their annual meeting, that they are going to discuss or introduce their new currency. This is a report that Jim Rickards talked about, where they are actually talking about coming out and introducing what we've been talking about a long time, this commodity-backed currency. What makes all of this even crazier, in the last few weeks, we've talked about Macron and him pushing back against the West, embracing the Chinese, buying liquid natural gas in yuan, striking a 51-point agreement with China from 5G to military engagement. He, according to the South African president, has requested to be present at the meeting in August. So you have France and Belarus, the two countries, European countries, that are now showing interest in joining the BRICS. You have Japan, who has just purchased a whole bunch of Russian oil above the benchmark that the U.S. set of $60 or something like that, and then purchasing them at around $70. That does not make the West and their sanctions happy. So things are beginning to really, really speed up as far as I'm concerned. And, when you talk about the significance of these countries, I'd like to read something real quick here that Jim Rickards brought up, and I found it to be fantastic. He says, he's talking about this new currency that will likely be pegged to gold. We talked about gold being revalued or revalued to a tier 1. We talk about all the countries who have repatriated their gold. We talk about the European countries who not only have repatriated their gold, but many of the countries like France have exchanged their gold that doesn't meet LBMA standards. In other words, they have bars that don't meet the purity. It's as if they're all preparing for some event by repatriating, by accumulating, by exchanging out bars that don't meet LBMA standards. It's as if something is coming. And he talks about how this plays right into the hands of the BRICS, because you have, with China and Russia, you have two of the largest gold producers in the world, ranked 6th and 7th respectively. With Saudi Arabia and Russia alone, he talks about you have two of the three largest energy producers in the world. He talks about with Russia, China, and Brazil and India, all members, you have 4 of the 7 largest countries in the world measured by land mass, 50% of the world's wheat and rice production, 15% of all the gold reserves. You have, when you talk about India, China, Brazil, you have 4 of the 9 highest population countries in the world. Not to mention, when you talk about Russia and China, you have 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world. And by every measure, population, land mass, energy output, GDP, food output, and nuclear weapons, BRICS is not just another, flimsy, let's just pass it off, it'll never happen. This is a growing, real entity. And when you see Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, France, Belarus, rumors of Japan and Australia, they're all showing interest and or applying. When Macron strikes deals with China, buying liquid natural gas in yuan, 51-point agreements, including military engagement, and requesting to be at the BRICS summit, it's more than just a feigning interest. And so I think this is a really, really, really big deal. And if what Jim says is true, and they do indeed introduce their new currency pegged to commodities in their August meeting, things are going to be very, 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 very interesting.
South Africa will host the next summit of BRICS countries, where the existing members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, will discuss the acceptance of new members and the introduction of the new currency that will be specifically created to end the dominance of the United States and the US dollar. The summit will hold in Johannesburg, South Africa's biggest city, between August 22nd and 24. Do you think the BRICS alliance will be successful in dethroning the US dollar and returning the world to the gold standard? Please drop your replies and comments on Andy Schectman's interview in the comments section below. If you are yet to do so, also ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos. Thanks for watching.